The Minister for Superannuation is Bill Shorten. He's in Melbourne tonight for a community cabinet meeting and he joined me a short time ago. Bill Shorten, welcome.
Good evening, Chris.
30% of Australians have their money invested in self-managed funds. Doesn't this trio fraud show that if they fall, there is no safety net?
Well, first of all, I believe the vast bulk of the self-managed superannuation funds are run by honest people and the investment decisions are made by honest people. I want to make sure that what happened to these investors in Trio can never happen again to anyone. We've a lot of our superannuation, a lot of our money's in highly regulated APRA funds, where if there is the random or rare act of theft and dishonesty and crime, all superannuation fund members across all super funds pay a levy to compensate the victims of crime. But in the self-managed superannuation fund sector, the SMSF sector said we don't want to be liable for a levy in the event that one of our number gets ripped off. So definitely it is a different ballgame if you're in the self-managed superannuation fund sector.
Do you think, though, that people understand that there is a trade-off here between choice and risk, that most of the people who invest in those funds understand that?
Well, I have to say that the Trio investigation, both the reports done by regulators but also by this parliamentary committee, show that not everyone does understand the risk-return scenario. In other words, the greater the promise of the return, the greater the likelihood there is risk. These people have been victims. There's been 6,000 people plus who've been a victim of criminal activity. 5,500 were in funds which were highly regulated by APRA, and they've been compensated by other superannuation fund members. But it's clear that some people just simply did not appreciate the risk that they were confronting.
But if you were looking at risk management, when you see that the people who are supposed to regulate this industry, for example, APRA conducted 5 prudential reviews of Trio between 2004 and 2009, and nothing came of any of them. So if you were doing a risk profile of a self-managed fund, you'd think, well, APRA thinks they're okay, so they should be okay.
Well, I certainly know that the regulators, the issue around the regulators has caused great consternation amongst the victims of Trio who haven't been eligible for compensation. My heart goes out to the people who've been ripped off. It's a shocking set of circumstances. I noticed that one of the people who ripped them off's in jail, but some of the others are gone in the wind. That is why this government has passed laws to discourage financial planners from receiving commissions and kickbacks from dodgy product providers, and instead they've just got to work for the customer and stop pushing people into schemes or propositions where the planner giving the advice gets money, but the person whose money they're advising on, well, they face the risk.
Now, the mastermind behind this appears to be, of course, there's been no conviction of any kind, no charges of any kind, Mr. Jack Flander, an American citizen who's living overseas. And the committee questions why there hasn't been a proper investigation to see whether or not he could be brought to justice, whether or not any of these funds could, or more of these funds could be recovered. What does the government intend to do about that?
It's a 200-page report. I've just got it, but I'm sympathetic to what you just said in terms of leaving no stone unturned to bring these crooks to justice. That is why, for instance, while we're considering the whole 200-page report, I noticed that there's a proposition advanced in the report which I'm going to take up with ASIC, which is that we ask ASIC to publicly fund the liquidator to do an investigation into ARP, which was one of the funds, so that we can indeed assist the process of bringing these people to justice.
The committee also said that it believes that the Trio fraud exposes significant vulnerability of the Australian superannuation savings system, which could be targeted by criminals. Now, given that there is $1.3 trillion worth of savings under management at the moment, that must concern you.
Well, I am very clear in the light of what's happened to Trio and this most recent report, which is a useful and important addition, and also when you scan some of the heartfelt evidence of some of the victims, I'm very clear that what we've done since Trio to give the regulators more power to act in a preemptive fashion is important. I'm also very clear that the government, despite the opposition's negativity, the reforms we've made to financial planning, so the financial planners aren't getting commissions and kickback from product providers and they're just acting in the best interest of the customer. They're the right things to do. But furthermore, I also think that the SMSF sector needs to give us an indication in government. Are they willing to have a levy system to compensate victims of crime like that which exists in the other styles of superannuation funds which most Australians belong to? I think there's some decisions to be made in the SMSF sector that if they feel that they want legitimately greater compensation when something goes wrong, we do need them to join the discussion about how you pay for it.
The inquiry also recommended that 77 unit holders who lost $55 million in an ARP growth fund be compensated. Will the government do that?
Well, what happened with all the other victims of Trio is that they were compensated, but it was paid for through a levy on all people in all superannuation funds in Australia. They weren't actually compensated by taxpayers. That doesn't mean that the 77 people haven't been through a tremendous amount of turmoil. I'm going to have to take that proposition on board. It's a pretty dreadful set of experiences for those 77 families or 77 individuals, and I do think that steps that the government's taken since Trio will prevent this happening again. I don't share the view, Chris, that $1.3 trillion of superannuation money is all at the same risk of being absconded with by crooks and criminals into the Caribbean, but there are lessons here which have got to be learned.
Bill Shorten, thank you.
Thank you.